Welcome to this Talks at Google virtual event. I'm Lynn Mehaula, and I'm on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion staffing team here at Google and co-lead of Pacifica People's Collective. Before we get started, I want to remind the audience that we will be taking questions towards the end of this talk. So as you think of questions throughout this conversation, please be sure to add them into the live chat on the right. And I'm very excited today to introduce you to our guest, Dr. Maya Soetoro-Ng.
Mahalo, aloha Googlers, and aloha Lynn.
Aloha, thank you so much for joining us. And quick background for the audience on you. Educator, mentor, and peace advocate Maya is a faculty specialist in the College of Social Sciences at the University of Hawaiʻi at Mānoa. She also serves as the university's liaison to the Obama Foundation and works with the foundation's Leaders Program and Global Girls Alliance on outreach initiatives in Hawaii and the Asia Pacific region. Previously, she was the director of the Matsunaga Institute for Peace at the University of Hawaiʻi. And in addition to leading the Institute's outreach and development initiatives, she taught and mentored students in leadership for social change, peace movements, peace education, and conflict management. For many years, she worked at the university's College of Education, where she taught multicultural education, social studies methods, and peace education at both the graduate and undergraduate levels. Dr. Soetoro-Ng sits on several volunteer boards and is co-founder of the nonprofit organization Seeds of Peace, the Peace Studio, and the Institute for Climate and Peace. Kumu Maya, it is my pleasure to welcome you to Talks at Google.
Mahalo. Thank you so much for having me.
We are so excited. And long list of very, very cool things that you've done in your career. I'd love, though, of course, our topic today is peace. And I'd love to start with a question specifically around peace building. So peace building has so many different definitions to different people, whether it's restoring indigenous lands, ending violent wars, finding internal mental calmness. Can you share with us your own concept of peace building, especially as it relates to the difference between positive and negative peace?
Definitely. Thank you for that question. So for me, peace is about activating each individual's potential to bring about collective good and sort of enlivening community energy. I really believe that each of us has the capacity to impact our immediate surroundings, but also to play at least a small role in working towards positive systemic change. But I think a lot of us are focused too often on what we don't want rather than building a creative collective vision of what is desired, strong, and healthy. So we focus on negative peace, in other words. Negative peace is not necessarily negative, but it's insufficient in my view. So negative peace essentially means the absence of acute violence or conflict. So it's not necessarily the presence of a loving, productive, just community. It focuses on what is not there rather than what can be and can be nourished by all the upstanders. Whereas positive peace, in contrast, is the aggregation of a lot of individuals acting together and bringing in their talents, their networks, their resources, their interests. And this matters because if all of us kind of commit to thinking of ourselves as positive peace builders, as justice seekers and movement builders, and whatever small ways we can activate, then we'll sort of naturally and proactively plant the seeds of peace to ensure that culture becomes more just, to wash our eyes is what I like to say, to shift to a strength-based approach and see ourselves as culture creators and powerful potential agents of positive change. And so we can't stop at conflict avoidance and expect that all will be well. We have to have the courage to see peace as a call to action and as everyone's responsibility, or kuleana, as we say here in Hawaii. And we can, if we do that, I believe, impact our families, our organizations, our neighborhoods, communities, and cultures as upstanders.
Thank you. Thank you. And As an Indonesian American based in the Pacific Islands, you spent your formative years among various peoples, places, cultures, and environments. How has this multicultural upbringing shaped the way you think of peace building, especially when it comes to thinking of efforts on both the local and the global scale?
So Indonesia is a highly populous country, right? I think it's the fourth most populous in the world, which of course means there is going to be a lot of religious and ethnic tension, and there's going to be struggle in resourcing everyone. And when I was 7 and 9 years of age, I witnessed a lot of anti-Chinese riots there in Java. My neighbors, who would be generous and kind and loving and give me sugarcane 1 minute, would be throwing stones in Chinese shop owner windows the next, or turning over cars and setting them on fire. Really terrible actions motivated by bigotry and anger. And recalling and processing these events a few years later, I really came to realize that we are complex creatures. We can become vehicles of violence one day and then show a great deal of courage and rise to great heights of heroism the next. And so Indonesia's motto is Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, which means unity and diversity. And in many ways, Indonesia has proven itself to be a really powerful exemplar of that aspiration. So Hindu pilgrims now go visit the grounds of the Islamic University in Yogyakarta to visit temple ruins that were found while excavating the grounds for a new library. So rather than ship off the temple remains, the Universitas Islam Indonesia became guardians and stewards. And I've also seen a Muslim school and a Christian school in Eastern Indonesia create a shared space for gardening, and they crafted plans for spiritual gardens and then planted each other's gardens. And so these kinds of things were frequent and reliable for me in childhood. This notion that cultural respect and generosity was possible, even in the midst of ethnic violence. We always witnessed a certain syncretism and civil and sustained dialogue. And for me, this meant that we have to water the good. We have to nourish the best in ourselves. We have both destroyer and creator in us. And so we have to stay vigilant about our shadow selves, and we have to commit to getting uncomfortable enough to grow moral courage, I guess.
I love hearing about these lessons you learned in Indonesia, and I'd love to dive into that further. And specifically, you've often spoken about your mother as a great influence in your work, especially when watching her do her anthropological fieldwork in Indonesia in the 1970s. And specifically, I love how you speak of ripple effects when talking about her approach to building peace, and this idea that our small actions in one community can ripple outward and create this broader change. Is there a specific lesson of hers that you found particularly relevant to today's 21st century challenges?
Oh, so many, actually. She was cool. She was a pioneer of microfinance programs, and her idea there was that you help the family, you help especially the women in the family find personal safety, autonomy, pathways forward economically. They would help their neighbors achieve the same. Cooperatives would form. And she saw this as the economic background and spine for Indonesia to become more resilient and stay peaceful. She posited that instead of abandoning villages and homes, it was important to encourage people to stay rooted in the places they love, and that these cottage industries or village industries could keep the country strong and would have those ripple effects you speak of. She was also just a really amazing student, a lifelong learner, always reading, studying philosophy and theology, and giving to us all the good books. She loved Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell for their collective consciousness, and she would tell us about the patterns of connection she was seeing, and this for her was helpful in understanding our empathetic capacities, and she loved the concept of mirror neurons and all of these ideas that help us to feel connected and recognize the beauty on earth and in each other. And this was a strength-based approach again, that allowed us to focus on being solutionary, to celebrate people's humanity and all the things that are working in society rather than what isn't. And in that sense, we were given great optimism and positive energy and this belief that, you know, when we all show up, we can really do something and grow.
Gosh, I wish I could meet her. I wish I could have met her. That sounds amazing.
And she would love you.
And just what a cool thing to experience as a youth. Just being able to be around that and see that from such a young age. I'd love to switch now and dive more into your work as co-founder of Peace Studio. And for those who don't know in our audience, Peace Studio equips artists and journalists with resources to tell restorative narratives, find community, and become peace-building leaders. And so my question is, could you tell us more about Peace Studio and how it came to be?
For sure. I love Peace Studio. I co-founded it a few years ago with my literary agent, Jennifer Gates, and her colleague, Todd Schuster. They both came to hear me speak at the Gandhi King Conference in Memphis, Tennessee in 2016. And at the end of my talk, I asked everyone to consider at least one way that they could commit to becoming active peace builders going forward. And Todd really took this to heart and approached us about building an organization that would resource artists and media makers with the support needed to become peace builders themselves. And so those were the early seeds, and building out Peace Studio was his way of contributing, but we all agreed that this was important and timely. And so the next year we were underway and brought together incredible leaders and storytellers.
Wow. And why do you see artists and journalists at the forefront of this peace movement?
Well, for me, the connective tissue there is storytelling. And so every social movement needs stories to help people imagine what could be, what a more peaceful and just and verdant society could look like. They need to feel a sense of hope. They need to feel empathy to reduce fear about the others. So storytellers motivate people to jump into the stream, to take action as positive peace builders. So we want to make sure that every artist and journalist across the United States and eventually the world has what they need to create the change that they wish to see in the world. And they can utilize their medium and their storytelling capacity to invest in their communities with that strength-based mindset rather than focus on what is broken. They can think about where there are people who are doing brave things and tell restorative narratives that have solutions embodied in them. And we also want to help artists to sustain their livelihoods and to imagine their professions as pragmatic and meaningful gifts to all of us.
Thank you. And could you share with us an example of maybe a specific artist or journalist whom you've invested in through Peace Studio and the impact that they've been able to make thus far?
Yes, I have so many beautiful artists and journalists in mind, but I'll speak about two. One is a string duo called Arkai, and they were with us at our very first Peace Studio gathering. And through our investment in them, particularly in connecting them to some of the resources they need and people who would invite them to participate, they were able to spend a good portion of the pandemic doing fundraising concerts for small businesses, mostly in New York City. These were businesses that were imperiled and were going to have to shut down their doors, and our Kai raised over $70,000 to help sustain them. And there were salons, there were local bars, and our Kai felt empowered and connected through their art and storytelling. And in terms of journalists, we have 2 young journalists from Afghanistan right now in our Peace Studio Fellowship program who fled the Taliban about a year ago. And with our support, they've gone from making car parts where they had to wake up at 3 a.m. every day to now working towards becoming journalists again. They live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so we're helping them to develop a series of national stories that will bring broader awareness to the Afghan refugee experience in this country, and hopefully lead to greater conversations about how we can support immigrants more generally.
I didn't realize it's so far reaching in terms of individuals from around the world, all over the country, especially since we do have Googlers all around the country in the US and all around the world. How can we as Googlers best support the work that Peace Studio is doing?
Thank you for asking that. Obviously, as a small, rapidly growing nonprofit, we're always grateful for financial contributions. And right now, in celebration of the International Day of Peace, any dollar given through the end of September will double by 2 individuals on our Peace Studio Board of Directors until we've hit $100,000 raised. So if that's something you or any of your extended network are interested in doing, thank you. And the link to give is thepeacestudio.org/donate. However, there are so many in-kind ways to support us. Both our board and staff work really hard to connect artists and journalists, fellows, and alumni network to individuals who will help mentor them and resource them as they do their work in the world. So some of the things that they're looking for are help with grant writing, building out pitch decks, documenting the peacebuilding projects, receiving support from mental health professionals, especially trauma-informed practitioners who are knowledgeable about supporting frontline communities, financial literacy assistance, a social media strategy, the presence of pro bono community spaces where they can convene and build community. So these are just a few examples. Feel free to email our executive director, Thomas West, at twest@thepeacestudio.org. If you are interested in learning more and being part of our family of volunteers, we welcome you to our Ohana with open arms and great gratitude.
And I'm made a note. I'm going to remind everybody at the end of that, thepeacestudio.org. That's an awesome challenge that you're having that matched. And so hopefully our Googlers can help out and get you there.
Mahalo. Thank you so much.
And I'd love to switch to talk about another organization. I mean, like I said, in the little blurb at the very beginning, it's like you've started so many different initiatives, which is incredible. And I'd love to hear more about specifically another one that you're the co-founder for, which is the Institute for Climate and Peace out of Honolulu. So how are the concepts of climate and peace integrally tied? And how did you decide to create an organization that serves communities at this unique intersection of practice?
Well, my co-founders and I really wanted to think about moving away from technical solutions and moving towards community source solutions. Not that the technical solutions aren't necessary, but we really saw that an ideology of change centered on cultivating positive peace and frontline community source solutions was necessary, in fact, urgent. So ICP was established on the premise that communities with low levels of positive peace experience a natural catastrophe death rate 13 times greater than those with high levels of positive peace, for instance. And the greatest method to build real climate resilience is to cultivate peace locally. This helps people to know how they can get involved, how they can make different decisions as consumers, as family members, as community leaders. And climate resilience persistently is is thought of in simplistic ways, right? And in top-down ways. And so we want to show the resilience and the brilliance and the resistance and the ingenuity of communities as we experience the worsening impacts of climate change. Our hope is that this will empower communities all over the world, and we have great examples of peace building, climate forward actions all over the world. And we work primarily in the Asia Pacific region, but we also connect globally and nationally.
I was so excited when I saw Institute for Climate and Peace because as a Polynesian person, I feel like the two are so integrally tied because the islands are very much, affected by climate change. And so one thing that I've been following in the news, and as and as hopefully most of the folks in our audience know, the U.S. Senate recently passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which aims to both limit the devastating effects of climate change and also to increase healthcare affordability for Americans. In the wake of this passing, what changes do you and the Institute for Climate and Peace expect to see in the near future?
Well, I think that we need to recognize that it was passed to initiate major changes through fund allocation with environmental and climate justice block grants, clean energy and emission reductions, and nature-based solutions. And so we see in the aggregation of these efforts support given to Native Hawaiians and others for climate resiliency. We see conservation efforts and greater environmental justice. The bill recognizes the disparate environmental consequences that certain communities experience by placing a priority on climate justice, which is what we care about. It also progresses in the right direction with its investment of nature-based solutions that offer critical opportunity for fostering resilience from the ground up. When you're looking at nature-based solutions, you're often looking at community-based grassroots solutions. And obviously there's still work to be done to reconcile policy and commitments with just action and investment objectives. But we are really hopeful that what we care about, this sort of achievement of just outcomes for those who are experiencing climate change firsthand, will really begin to happen, and that we can all collaborate with communities and execute programs and initiatives, collaborate and engage in policy transformation with government as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I'd love to dive into yet another organization that you're a leader in, and this particular organization is Seeds of Peace, and spelled CEEDS, Seeds of Peace. And this is an organization that you co-founded with the mission of raising the next generation of peace-building leaders. And now this name stems from the seeds, CEEDS, that you spread, the strategies and tools for peace building that you develop and share with other community leaders. So a question I have about this program is, could you give us a couple examples of these specific seeds programs?
Yeah, so Seeds of Peace starts with a C because we work on peace building values like courage, critical thinking, compassion, conflict resolution, commitment, collaboration, connection. In each of our programs, we teach these, we model these. We have a really large assemblage of innovators and tools and strategies to facilitate this, to raise peace building leaders. So we have workshops for educators and other adults in our communities to give them the tools and strategies to wrap around the youth. And then we focus on topics like social emotional learning, trauma sensitive care, activating youth voice and leadership, leading from beside, behind, and beneath as well as in front. And so we also run youth programs where youth have platform to be activists and community organizers as they tackle things like climate justice, gun reform, mental health, discrimination, and many other topics that they choose. And so we serve a number of different schools and work in several schools to develop the concept of community schooling, where youth are wrapped in support and resources from their community, local health centers, theaters, sports programs, food pantries, transportation services, etc.
And similar to my question with Peace Studio, what opportunities are there for our viewers to support your organization and also to plant these seeds in their own communities?
Yes, well, go to seedsofpeace.org, and there are ways that you can contribute financially, of course, but also we have an amazing co-op toolkit that you can use. It's open source, so dive in there, and you can use our action plan template. It starts with envisioning the harvest. What do you want your homeschools and communities to look like, feel like? Write it down, draw it out, work on it together with stakeholders, collaborators, and young people, and then prepare the soil, which is where you identify the barriers, the opportunities, the gaps and gifts of your community. And you bring youth and elder to the table, like nothing for us without us, right? So bring young people, respect their gifts, and then co-lead with them and bring new and old perspectives as you plant the seeds, and use the best practices from your communities, from other communities, brainstorm your own, start implementing peace building actions in your homeschool and communities. Start with what is most immediately around you, and that will empower and make braver your young people, but also yourselves, and you can all think of yourselves as peace building leaders, and find sources on our open toolkit, our co-op toolkit. Add to them, indeed, and as you plan ways to nurture, sustain peace and work together.
Well, Googlers love open source things that they can access and add to. So I'm sure this will be very helpful. And I like that a lot of this is things that people can, this exists already. And it's not as daunting as, okay, how am I going to go just create seeds of peace in my community? That seems so daunting. But if you go on here and kind of see a bit of a framework and it makes it more accessible for folks. So thank you for sharing that. So I want to switch gears. I'm a huge podcast fan, and one of the most powerful ways I think to reach people nowadays is through podcasts. There are podcasts everywhere, and I was surprised to see, or I was not surprised, sorry, to see that you are also using this podcast medium to amplify change makers' voices. So in 2021, you launched the podcast, the Brave Through series, Courageous Conversations on Community, and this was in partnership with KTUH Honolulu. So could you tell us more about the Brave Through series and its goals, and maybe even, if you have it, a story about an especially interesting guest you've had?
Definitely, yes. Zephanie, who produces it, and I started this podcast last year called Brave Through. And that's, of course, a bit of a play on words, this idea of, we can break through seemingly intractable problems and find solutions by being brave and creative. And so we feature guests who are incredible solutionaries and courageous ones. I guess I'll talk about my first two guests, Liam and James. They're both working on pressing complex problems. Liam's conversation was about restorative justice and the community task force he co-led in Oakland to reimagine public safety and policing. And all of the recommendations emerging from these task force community sessions ended up being financed and implemented and will be so instructive for the rest of the nation. They are being implemented now slowly. The first dozen, I think, at least. And James is one of the leaders of Hui Aloha. And Hui Aloha works to bring together houseless and housed communities to give back to the community and do work cleaning up parks and beaches and bathrooms and building canoe gardens, gardens that feature the plants that the kanaka maoli, the Hawaiians, brought over in the canoe originally. And so this nonprofit, Hui Aloha, works with the houseless community now in Waianae, Twinkle and Pu'uhonua Waianae, creating a village and using this village model of community to show how the houseless can teach us all how to build community and family from the ground up. So I really see the goal of the podcast to be about finding these ingenious efforts that can be scaffolded and adapted, adjusted for other places, and so that we can all support one another in moving through the storms and untangling the seemingly untangleable issues that we are facing today in our world.
I did check, and our the Brave Through series is available on our Google Podcast app. So please, folks, tune in. No excuses. It's available. Go ahead and check out the Brave Through series.
Thank you. I'm excited to move forward with that. I'm still a baby podcaster, but
but I've listened to a couple. They're fantastic. So you don't seem like a baby podcaster.
It's so fun.
And another thing I'd love to talk about is you authored a children's book called Ladder to the Moon in 2011, which I recently purchased for my own children. I'm pregnant with twins, and so I'm like looking for books. And so I saw, and I'm like, I have to get this. And so, I'm going to, once it arrives, I'm going to start reading it to my belly. But the vivid imagery seems so personal to your own upbringing and the deep connection that you've shared with your family. So I'd love to hear what inspired you to write this book. And also, do you have any other literary works on the horizon?
Yes. So Ladder to the Moon was a way for me to think about what lessons Mom would have shared with my daughter had she been alive to do so. She died 9 years before my eldest daughter, Suhaila, was born. She loved the moon because she said, everywhere you are, the moon is the one thing that's the same. The constellations change in the sky, but the moon on any given day in Lahore, Pakistan, and in Spain and Hawaii, it's the same moon. And so it was a connecting force also because it governs the tides. So some of the lessons I sought to impart in the book for parents and teachers to share with their kids, their keiki, are seeing things from multiple perspectives and shifting perspectives, that washing of the eyes that I spoke about earlier, as well as the importance of servant leadership and embodying an attitude of service towards one another. And so the book imagines Suhaila being invited up to the moon by her grandma, and from there, they look down on earth and see much that is beautiful and brave. They also see suffering, and they begin helping others to climb to the moon. And the moon becomes a restorative place of connection where people who speak different language become mutually intelligible, and people of different faiths find a common pathway, and they sip on moon dew and build spiral staircases of moonlight. So, and I do have a young adult novel that I am working on. I'm trying to do the final edits right now, but I only ever do it you know, a day here or a day there, but it's about a teenage peace builder. And this book is called Yellowwood and utilizes a lot of the stories and motifs from my childhood in Indonesia. And I hope that everyone will enjoy it when it gets published.
Gosh, I'm excited. I'm excited. Yay. More books to buy. Before I get to my next question, I also just want to remind the audience that we will be in about 5 minutes or so, we'll be reading questions from the audience. So if you have any questions for Maya, please go ahead and type those in so that we can read them live here. So another question I have is, you know, you talked a bit about your daughters and, you know, how much do your daughters know about the work you do, and have they expressed interest in following in your path?
You know, we're only interested in our parents, I think, later in life when we begin to morph into them, right? So, but my daughters definitely know about my work. I've intentionally brought them with me on many different projects, and they have attended Seeds of Peace workshops and so forth. And I believe deeply in the importance of intergenerational duet. So I'm going to bring my daughters in. This notion that adults and young people have so much to learn from each other and should work together to service their communities is one that they understand and believe in as well. And I am blown away by how creative young people, including my daughters, are. And I think that they have extraordinary skills and tools within them, and they're so naturally inclusive, and they're obviously going to be necessary in solving the many challenges of our world. So we have to respect what they bring. In terms of my daughters following my path, though, I think that, you know, I think that they will follow their own hearts and unique paths, but they will bring in a sense of peace building identity, positive peace building into whatever they do. So I'm proud of the decisions they're making and the things that they're interested in and the ways in which they are already caring for others in local communities. Suhaila is studying botany and invested in the environment and in the restoration of native and indigenous plants. Savita's really artistic and also interested in how art can be a tool for mental wellness and positive change.
It sounds very much like they are blazing their own trails, but very much with inspiration from you, which reminds me of you and your own mother, you know, and you very much have blazed your own trails, but you always have those lessons and those things you refer back to, you know, that you learned from her, which I love. My last question for you before we get to audience questions is, how can we at Google commit to active peace building, especially in this modern world with such busy schedules?
Well, I'd encourage the Googlers to ask themselves that question: how might I see and lift up the gifts in my own heart, the gifts of my colleagues, friends, family, and what are the small steps that I can take to make a positive difference in my community and the organization? If you're an artist, make us feel something expansive. If you're a storyteller, tell stories that are not yet known, spotlight those that have too long been in the shadows, bring important stories from the periphery to the center. If you're a designer or architect, build physical and digital spaces that deepen people's personal peace and interpersonal connection. Think about how you can nourish wellness all around you, make people feel optimistic about the future of our planet so that they're not mired in grief, activate their sense of agency. And, you know, all of us are influencing this next generation and helping to shape culture. So we might as well, you know, seek to engage in positive peace building as much as we are able. In spite of the craziness of our day-to-day lives, resilience is our resistance. Resilience is our resistance. So if there is something that is oppressive, if there's something that's messed up, grow your resilience as an act of resistance. And this doesn't have to be something you're dedicating exorbitant amounts of time or resources to. In fact, we encourage you to start small and reflect on what you can do in your own home to create sanctuary, or the places in your community to grow good. Think about reading more about nonviolent communication and developing those tools, or consider how you can show up in the world more mindfully and be more present, deeply listening for friends and colleagues, and loving more fiercely, and having that posture of real curiosity as you engage. So make good choices as consumers that help our environment, and respect frontline community workers, and connect with people who are distant and different. These are just some of the hundreds of examples that I could give, but the point is that the work begins with each of us and doesn't need to be overwhelming. So let's do this.
Absolutely. It does begin with each of us, and we're all responsible. And so I'm hoping that folks here listening definitely feel inspired to start building peace in their own communities. Now, folks, don't forget, I don't think we have any questions yet on the YouTube chat, but I do have some fun, more lighthearted ones for you. So since you're here at Google, Maya, I have to ask, is there a Google product you can't live without?
To be honest, I just really like the search engine. I utilize it every day. I am constantly needing to be reminded of something, or I'm curious and want to learn the basics about something. And I think that the basic Google search engine helps me to learn every single day. So it's so basic. Am I being boring?
No, I love that. And you know what? It's funny because people always forget, because Google search is so integrated into our daily lives. It's just like, oh, I'm going to Google it. So when I ask people about Google products, they're like, products? I'm like, the phone? Or I'm like, no, even some of the products like search, YouTube, stuff you use every single day. They're just, so I love hearing when people pick the OGs. And another question too is, what's your favorite Indonesian food?
Oh God, I miss Indonesian food so much. We don't really have a lot here in Hawaii. If you folks have an Indonesian restaurant in your hoods, by all means go. Probably my favorite is ikan pepes. Well, there's a way of cooking. I am vegetarian now, so we do it with tofu, but it is basically wrapped, I guess, in papaya leaves, and there's lemongrass and lime and galangal and ginger, and it's steamed and delicious.
Oh my goodness, gosh. Now you're making me hungry, and I'm already hungry all the time. So now I'm going to have to go try to find that.
Go to it. I mean, Indonesian food has a lot of similarity to like Thai food or Indian food, but it's really unique and delicious. Lots of basil and bright spices and pandan, and yeah, just check it out. And more restaurants so that I can eat them.
Trust me, I'm sitting here in the middle of Texas, so I'm, have a harder time getting it there. But yes, open more Indonesian restaurants. Well, I'd love to switch it over to one of our audience questions. So we'll go ahead and pull that up right now. And this is from Jose Martinez. So what comes next for you, Maya? What other initiatives are you passionate about that you're hoping to shed light on?
Mahalo, Jose. That's a great question, and I seldom get asked. I am really excited about building out the Girls Opportunity Alliance engagement, and I'm working on developing supportive programs for leaders in the Asia Pacific. I think that the Pacific Asia region has a lot to share with the rest of the world around navigational leadership. And navigational leadership is something that we all need right now to weather and move through these storms. This notion of keeping our eyes on the horizon and being futures thinking, but also listening carefully to the surface of the water and what is beneath and the movement of the winds. And metaphorically speaking, I think it's the leadership we need. I think that something that I'd also like to do is to begin thinking about democracy more, not just how to fix, but also how to reimagine and innovate in democratic spaces, and to increase the upstander capacity and the participatory capacity of young people, especially. Want to do more storytelling and to highlight incredible solutionaries all over the continent, but also in other parts of the globe, and to use that as inspiration to get us out of the pessimism in which we are too often sitting these days.
Thank you, Maya, and thank you, Jose, for your question. I think we have another audience question as well. This one is from Mike Rolfs. What is one step we can all take to help bring more peace to our communities?
So I really appreciate the question, but I really think it's got to be different for everyone. My hope is that you will each engage in careful listening and then take action based on what you hear in the way of needs and gaps. I do think that it's important that you think of building personal peace, interpersonal peace, and peace and service to others. And so your step should be taken in the direction of perhaps personal peace first, ensuring that's there. And then, do something that helps others, maybe that is offering kindness. Maybe it's contributing your research, sharing resources, looking at systemic injustice and trying to impact policy or organizational culture to make it more inclusive. Maybe it's about stewardship of environment. Maybe it's about making sure that there's less domestic violence and that there are more safe spaces to counter gender-based violence. Maybe it's about looking at those who are most burdened by the climate crisis or facing financial insecurity, and just asking them what they need and want, and inviting them to work alongside you and teach us about positive outcomes. So just find actions that are manageable and in keeping with who you are, your skills, your tools, and your network.
Thank you. I love that. And I love that peace building can look so different for each person and each community. And we all have to do our part and in what's passionate for us. And I truly believe that if we're all chipping away at these little areas, it'll lead to that global peace. And so I love that idea. Yeah, just everybody finding what you're passionate about, what's manageable for you, and what is needed in your community. And we have another question from the audience that we will pull up right here. This is from Guinevere de la Mare. Aloha from Kama'aina Googler. Aloha. Representation is an important part of building peace. How can Google work to bring more Native Hawaiian and Pacifica representation into tech?
Well, I love the question. I think it's really important, as I said, Pacifica peoples are navigators who have important information for us all. They are on the front line of the climate crisis, but they also have strong indigenous systems and solutions. So yes, bring those stories, bring those stories. I think that it's it's important that we also, I think it's important that we think about the metaphor of, sort of casting the net widely, perhaps, or canoe travel. And again, finding those stories of navigators who are braving through challenging situations. So, you can think about, what is your island destination? Who are you putting in your canoe? And what happens if the weather is inclement, or you have to face those doldrums? And as we are moving through, and as Google is considering diversifying stories, think about perhaps the work, anti-racist work of acknowledging the Marshall Islands that have borne the brunt of environmental destruction as we tested. Think about the relationship with the military in Guam, and seek to tell stories of peace building where we can make sure that there is no sort of oppression with the territories. Make sure that we are not thinking of islands as sacrifice zones when we are doing climate work, and not simply saying, oh, well, sea level rise is inevitable, right? So there's so much value in seeing these island people as in really personal ways, as our sisters, our aunties, our uncles, and our teachers, and as powerful survivors.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And thank you for the question as well. I love that question, and I love your answer. Now, as we unwind our time together, I have just one last question, and that's, you have so many things going on. What is your favorite way to unwind at the end of the day?
I love a good hammock, as it turns out. So I have one on my lanai, and I will watch the sunset. And I have plumeria trees, frangipani right outside, and the birds land and visit with me, and just kind of reconnecting my breath to nature. That's meditation, just watching things in motion, the clouds and the birds and the leaves, and remembering that I am part of all of that, and it is part of me, and feeling nurtured. That's a good thing. And music and dancing, and putting on a little music. I'll say, "Hey Google, turn on salsa," and I am not ashamed to admit that last night there was Hector Lavoe and some old school salsa that was happening in my house.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, and just thank you so much for your candor and for taking the time to speak with us, Maya. We really appreciate it. And I want to remind our viewers about something we talked about earlier, the challenge, the peacestudio.org/donate. Please, folks, head on over there, as well as, if you are interested in starting some of this peace journey and building some of this in your community, you can go to seedsofpeace.org, seeds spelled with a C, for the co-op open source toolkit, and learn how you can make some of those changes there. But thank you so much, Maya. We so greatly appreciate the work you're doing and taking this time to talk with us here at Google.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure, and sending you so much aloha, and grateful to be in conversation with you and the audience too, the Googlers. I guess I am now kind of being adopted into the Googler family. Is that what's happening here?
You're an honorary Googler.
Right
You're
on.
a Googler now. Yes, and you didn't have to go through the whole interview process. You're a Googler now. Thank you so much, and mahalo. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in.